The three Comanche women stood on wooden platforms with hemp ropes around their necks. The entire town of Deadwood Creek had gathered in the dusty square. Men removed their hats. Women clutched their children closer. The desert wind made the ropes creak. Judge Micah Bell wore his black coat despite the heat. His voice carried across the silent crowd as he read from the death warrant. The charges were massacre, theft, murder of the Henderson family. Aloy kept her chin raised. She was 25 and proud. Zelda, the medicine woman, whispered prayers to the wind. Lara, barely 20, searched the crowd for a face she would never see again. The crowd pressed forward. Blood hunger filled their eyes. This was frontier justice. This was what they came for. A slurred voice cut through the desert air. "That's a lie." Every head turned. Arthur Morgan swayed near the back of the crowd. His hat sat crooked on his head. A whiskey bottle dangled from his fingers. He was the town drunk. Everyone knew Arthur Morgan. Judge Bell's eyes narrowed. "You have something to say, Morgan?" Arthur stumbled forward. His boots kicked up dust. "These women didn't kill nobody. I was there, I saw who did." The crowd murmured. Some laughed. Others looked uncomfortable. Arthur Morgan hadn't been sober in 3 years. "You're drunk," Bell said. "Sheriff, remove this man." John Marston stepped forward. His hand rested on his gun. He looked at Arthur with something like pity. Arthur raised his bottle toward the judge. "I invoke the right of testimonial challenge." The crowd fell silent. Even drunk, Arthur knew the law. He'd been a soldier once, before the war broke him, before the whiskey claimed him. Judge Bell's face darkened. His hand moved to his gavel. "You would stake your life on the word of savages. I'd stake my life on the truth." The wind picked up. Dust swirled around the platforms. The three women watched Arthur with eyes that held no hope. They'd learned not to expect mercy from white men. Bell's voice turned cold. "Very well. You have 48 hours to present evidence. If you fail, you'll hang beside them." The crowd began to disperse. Whispers followed Arthur like shadows. Why would he risk everything for 3 Indian women? What had he really seen that night? Why did the judge seem so eager for blood? Arthur dropped his bottle. It shattered against the ground. For the first time in months, he felt something other than numbness. Dutch Williams approached from the blacksmith shop. He was a freed slave who'd made his way west after the war. His massive hands were stained with soot. "You just signed your death warrant, fool." Arthur watched the women being led back to jail. Aloy met his eyes. Recognition passed between them. Something else, too. A question neither could voice. The jail sat at the edge of town. Arthur waited until the crowd thinned before he walked inside. The sheriff's office smelled of tobacco and leather. John Marston sat behind his desk, cleaning his gun. "You can't save them," John said without looking up. "The whole territory wants Indian blood. Don't make yourself the enemy." Arthur ignored him. He walked to the cells. The 3 women sat in silence. Zelda held Lara's hand. Aloy stared at the wall. "Why?" Aloy asked. Her English was perfect. "Your people want us dead." Arthur gripped the bars. His knuckles were white. "Maybe I owe your people something." Lara spoke for the first time. "My son is hidden in the hills. He's only 3 winters old. If I die, he dies too." The words hit Arthur like a physical blow. He thought of all the children he'd seen during the war, all the families torn apart, all the blood on his hands. Zelda looked up. "I healed white settlers, saved their children from fever. They call it witchcraft now." Arthur's throat tightened. "What really happened at the Henderson place?" Aloy stood. "We were not there. We were 2 days' ride north gathering medicine plants. But who will believe us?" "Someone will," Arthur said. "Someone has to." He left the jail as the sun began to set. The town felt different now. Hostile. People watched him from doorways and windows. He'd chosen his side. Sadie Adler waited outside her saloon. She was a widow who'd taken over the business after her husband died. Her eyes were sharp as broken glass. "You sure about this, Arthur?" "No." "Good. Certainty makes men stupid." She leaned against the doorframe. "The Henderson massacre was real, but something doesn't sit right about it." Arthur felt hope stir in his chest. "What do you mean?" "Come inside. We need to talk." The saloon was empty except for a few regulars. Sadie poured Arthur coffee instead of whiskey. The gesture wasn't lost on him. "The weapons," she said quietly. "Indian raids use arrows, tomahawks. The Hendersons were killed with military rifles." Arthur's pulse quickened. "How do you know?" "Because Doc Stevens told me, right before he left town real sudden-like." The pieces began to form a picture. Arthur's mind, clear for the first time in months, started working. Who else knows? Nobody who's talking. Fear makes people stupid too. Arthur stood. 48 hours wasn't much time, but it was enough to start asking questions. Enough to follow the trail of blood and lies. Outside, the desert wind carried the scent of sage and dust. The three women would live or die based on what he could prove. The weight of their lives pressed down on him like stones. But for the first time since the war ended, Arthur Morgan had a purpose beyond drowning his guilt. He had a chance at something that might pass for redemption. The hunt for truth had begun. Dawn broke over Deadwood Creek like a wound in the sky. Arthur stood outside the Henderson place, 36 hours remaining. The burned cabin cast long shadows across the hardpan earth. The official story crumbled under examination. Military rifle casings glinted in the morning light. Arthur pocketed them one by one. No arrows, no tomahawks, just brass and lies. Dutch Williams rode up on his old mare. The blacksmith's massive frame looked small against the endless sky. "Found something you need to see." They rode to the creek bed where the Hendersons kept their cattle. Hoofprints told a story the law never heard. Shod horses, military boots. The tracks led north toward the territorial line. "White men," Dutch said, "dressed up like Indians for show." Arthur knelt beside the clearest print. The boot heel had a distinctive chip. He'd seen that mark before, somewhere in the fog of his drinking years. Hosea Matthews waited at the burned cabin. The old preacher had been a lawyer once, before age and wisdom taught him better. His fingers traced the bullet holes in the doorframe. "Federal crime," Hosea said. "Impersonating Indians to incite war, that's a hanging offense." Arthur's hands shook, not from drink this time, from anger. "How do we prove it?" "Same way we proved everything else in this territory, with blood and witnesses." The ride back to town took them past the cemetery. Fresh graves dotted the hillside. Too many fresh graves. The Indian wars had been good for undertakers and bad for everyone else. Sadie met them at the saloon's back door. Her face was pale. "Judge Bell's been asking questions about who's been talking to you." Arthur felt the noose tighten, not around his neck, around the necks of everyone trying to help. "What kind of questions?" "The kind that come with threats." They gathered in the saloon's back room. Arthur, Dutch, Sadie, and Hosea, 4 people against a town that wanted blood. The odds felt familiar. Arthur had faced worse during the war. "We need witnesses," Arthur said. "Someone who saw the real killers." Dutch leaned forward. "There's a tracker named Eagle Flies, been asking questions around the Indian camps. Might know something." The name hit Arthur like a physical blow. Eagle Flies, he'd heard that name before, in the fog of a drunken night 3 weeks ago. Sadie poured coffee for everyone except Arthur. The gesture spoke louder than words. "He's Aloy's brother. Been tracking the real killers since the massacre." Arthur's memory stirred. A night of heavy drinking, sounds in the darkness, the smell of gunpowder and blood. He'd been camped near the Henderson place. Too drunk to remember clearly. "I need to find him," Arthur said. The sun climbed higher. Time leaked away like water through broken hands. Arthur rode north alone, following the tracker's trail. The desert stretched endlessly in all directions. Eagle Flies found him first. The Comanche warrior emerged from a stand of cottonwoods near the creek. His face was painted for war. His eyes held the same proud fire as his sister's. "You're the drunk who challenged the judge," Eagle Flies said. Arthur climbed down from his horse. "I'm trying to save your sister." "Why would a white man risk his life for us?" The question hung in the air between them. Arthur had no good answer, only the weight of old guilt and the hope of redemption. Eagle Flies studied him. "You were there that night, at the Henderson place." Arthur's blood turned to ice. How do you know? Because I was tracking you. Thought you might be one of the killers. Eagle flies moved closer. But you were too drunk to kill anyone, too drunk to remember what you saw. The memories came flooding back. Arthur stumbling through the darkness, the sound of horses, men's voices speaking English, the smell of burned powder. I saw them, Arthur whispered, white men dressed as Indians fleeing north. Eagle flies nodded. One of them dropped this. He held up a military button. The brass caught the sunlight. Cavalry issue, recent. Arthur's hands trembled as he took the button. Evidence. Real evidence, but evidence of what? A conspiracy that reached into the territorial government itself. There's more, Eagle Flies said. The leader. He had a scar across his left hand. Deep. Old. Arthur's world tilted. He knew that scar, had seen it 100 times in the courthouse. Judge Bell's son, Micah Jr., bore that exact mark from a childhood accident. The pieces fell into place. The rushed trial, the lack of real evidence, the judge's eagerness for execution. Bell was covering for his own blood. We need to find him, Arthur said. Micah Jr. He's hiding somewhere. Eagle Flies pointed north. There's a lined shack in the hills, abandoned, good place for a man to disappear. They rode together through the afternoon heat. Arthur and the Comanche warrior, two men from different worlds united by the pursuit of truth. The shack sat in a hollow between two hills. Smoke rose from the chimney. Someone was home. Arthur approached on foot. His boots made no sound on the hard earth. The door hung open. Inside, a figure sat hunched over a table. Micah Jr. looked up as Arthur entered. The young man's face was gaunt with fear. His left hand bore the scar exactly as Eagle Flies had described. I wondered when someone would come, Micah said. Arthur stepped closer. The shack smelled of sweat and desperation. Your father's about to hang 3 innocent women. I know. The simple admission hung between them. Arthur had expected denials. Lies, violence. Instead, he found a broken man consumed by guilt. Why? Arthur asked. Micah Jr.'s voice cracked. The land, it's always about the land. Father said the Indians had to go, said it was manifest destiny. Arthur felt sick. So you dressed up like Indians and massacred a family. We thought it would scare them off, make them leave peaceful-like. Micah's hands shook. But the Hendersons fought back, and then... The young man couldn't finish. Arthur didn't need him to. The massacre had spiraled beyond their control. Blood had been spilled that couldn't be taken back. Come with me, Arthur said. Tell the truth, save those women. Micah Jr. looked up. His eyes held the same desperate hope Arthur had seen in the jail. Father will kill me. Maybe, but those women will surely die if you don't speak. The sun was setting as they rode back toward town. Arthur, Eagle Flies, and Micah Jr. The truth finally dragged into the light. But as they crested the hill overlooking Deadwood Creek, Arthur saw something that made his blood run cold. Federal cavalry, 2 companies at least. They'd made camp outside the town. Judge Bell's final gambit had arrived. The military solution to the Indian problem. If the women were released, the cavalry would consider it an act of war. Arthur looked at Micah Jr. The young man's face was white with terror. His father had outmaneuvered them all. The choice was no longer between truth and lies. It was between justice for 3 women and survival for thousands. The cavalry camp spread across the valley like a disease. 24 hours remained until the execution. Arthur watched from the ridge as soldiers watered their horses and cleaned their weapons. Judge Bell's insurance policy had teeth. Micah Jr. trembled beside him. The young man's guilt had worn him down to bone and shadow. Father planned this from the beginning. If the women go free, Colonel Favors will call it an act of war. Eagle Flies spat into the dust. Your people always find reasons for war. Arthur felt the weight of impossible choices. Save 3 innocent women and condemn thousands to military slaughter. Let justice die to prevent genocide. The mathematics of survival had no clean answers. They made camp in a canyon that night. No fire, no warmth, just the desert wind and the sound of Micah Jr.'s confession bleeding into the darkness. We rode out dressed as Indians, Micah said. Father's idea, make it look like a raid, scare the settlers into demanding military action. Arthur listened without speaking. The truth was a poison that burned everything it touched. Henderson fought back harder than we expected, started shooting. We panicked. Micah's voice cracked. Father said we had to kill them all, no witnesses. The stars wheeled overhead, cold and distant. Arthur thought of all the families he destroyed during the war, all the children left orphaned by his actions, the cycle of violence that never stopped turning. The cattle theft, Arthur asked. Staged, we drove the cattle onto Indian land, created a property dispute. Micah's hands shook in the moonlight. Father has buyers lined up for every acre. Eagle Flies stood abruptly. His silhouette was sharp against the stars. My people die for your father's greed. Arthur closed his eyes. The weight of it all pressed down on him. 3 women in cells. Thousands of innocents in the path of cavalry justice. One drunk cowboy caught in the middle. Dawn came too soon. Arthur rode into town alone, leaving Eagle Flies to guard Micah Jr. The streets felt different now. Hostile. People watched him from doorways and windows. Dutch Williams waited at the blacksmith shop. His face was grim. They hit us in the night, burned me out. The shop was a blackened ruin, tools scattered, forge cold. Dutch's life's work reduced to ash and memory. Bell's warning, Dutch said. Stop helping you or face the consequences. Arthur's throat tightened. His choice to fight had painted targets on everyone who'd helped him. The mathematics of justice demanded payment from the innocent. Sadie's saloon was shuttered. A notice on the door declared it closed for licensing violations. Arthur found her at the boarding house, packing a single bag. I'm leaving, she said without looking up. Can't fight the whole territory. Arthur wanted to argue, to rally his allies, to find words that could resurrect their cause, but the truth was simpler than hope. They'd lost before they'd begun. The women? Sadie asked. Still in their cells, still innocent. She nodded. Her fingers traced the edge of her bag. Sometimes innocent ain't enough. Arthur left her to her packing. The sun climbed higher. Time ran out drop by drop. He walked to the courthouse where Judge Bell held court over lesser men's fates. The judge's office was a monument to territorial power. Law books lined the walls. A territorial flag hung behind his desk, everything clean and ordered and built on lies. Bell looked up as Arthur entered. Come to confess your sins, Morgan. Arthur sat without invitation. Come to hear you confess yours. The judge's smile was winter cold. I have nothing to confess. 3 savage women killed innocent settlers. Justice demands their lives. Your son killed those settlers. Bell's face didn't change. My son is dead. The words hit Arthur like a physical blow. What? Micah Jr. died 3 days ago, thrown from his horse. Tragic accident. Bell's voice was steady as stone. Whatever lies you think you've uncovered died with him. Arthur's world tilted. You're lying. Am I? Ride out to the canyon, see for yourself. Arthur ran from the courthouse. His boots pounded the boardwalk. People scattered from his path. The desert stretched endlessly before him as he rode north. The canyon was empty. No Eagle Flies, no Micah Jr. Just wind and silence and the lingering smell of gunpowder. Arthur found the grave in a grove of cottonwoods, fresh earth. No marker. Micah Jr.'s confession had been buried with his body. Eagle Flies emerged from the rocks. His face was painted for mourning. Your judge came in the night with soldiers. Arthur's hands shook. Where's the body? Gone. They took him back to town, said he died in a riding accident. Eagle Fly's voice was hollow. The soldiers made sure I understood the story. The truth had been murdered, buried in unmarked ground. Arthur felt the weight of defeat settling on his shoulders like dust. My sister? Eagle Flies asked. Arthur couldn't meet his eyes. 12 hours. They rode back toward town in silence. The sun beat down mercilessly. The desert stretched in all directions, endless and empty and honest in its brutality. Arthur thought of the 3 women in their cells. Aloy with her proud defiance, Zelda with her gentle wisdom, Lara with her hidden son. all of them waiting for a salvation that would never come. The cavalry camp grew larger as they approached. More soldiers had arrived. The military solution to the Indian problem was gathering momentum. Arthur stopped at the ridge overlooking Deadwood Creek. The town spread below him like a wound in the earth. Smoke rose from chimneys. Children played in the streets. Life continued its inexorable march toward injustice. "There has to be another way," Arthur said. Eagle Flies was quiet for a long moment. "There is, but it requires a different kind of courage." Arthur looked at him. "What do you mean?" "The kind of courage that accepts sacrifice, the kind that saves lives by giving them up." The words hung between them. Arthur thought of the war, of all the times he'd chosen survival over honor, of all the chances for redemption he'd let slip away. The sun was setting, 12 hours until the execution. Arthur rode into town knowing he would never ride out again, but perhaps that was the point. Perhaps redemption wasn't about surviving your sins. Perhaps it was about choosing how to die for something greater than yourself. The three women were still in their cells, still innocent, still waiting for a miracle that might yet come from the most unlikely source. Arthur Morgan had one last card to play, one final choice to make. The mathematics of justice demanded payment. It was time to settle his debts. Dawn broke over the execution ground. The three women stood once more on wooden platforms, the same ropes, the same hungry crowd, but something had changed in the desert air. Arthur walked through the gathered townspeople. His steps were steady now, no whiskey on his breath, no tremor in his hands. The weight of his decision had burned away everything except purpose. Judge Bell read the death warrant again. His voice carried the authority of territorial law. The crowd pressed closer. Federal soldiers watched from the edges. Colonel Favors sat his horse with military precision. "Any last words?" Bell asked the condemned women. Aloy lifted her chin. "We die innocent. The truth will find you." The executioner reached for the lever. Arthur stepped forward from the crowd. His voice cut through the morning stillness. "I killed the Henderson family." The crowd erupted. Judge Bell's face went white. The executioner's hand froze above the lever. "I said I killed them," Arthur repeated. "These women had nothing to do with it." People shouted, pushed, demanded explanations. Arthur stood in the center of it all, calm as stone. Judge Bell recovered first. "You're lying to save them." "Am I?" Arthur pulled out the military button Eagle Flies had found. "Found this at the scene, along with these." He scattered the rifle casings across the ground. Brass cartridges caught the sunlight, evidence of the real massacre. "Federal weapons," Arthur said, "not Indian arrows." Colonel Favors dismounted. His face was granite hard. "Where did you get these?" "From the real killers." "White men dressed as Indians, your men, Colonel." The accusation hung in the air. Favors studied the casings. His expression changed. "These are from our arsenal, recently stolen." Judge Bell's composure cracked. "This proves nothing. Morgan's trying to create confusion." "Then let's clear it up." A new voice cut through the chaos. Eagle Flies emerged from the crowd, but he wasn't alone. Behind him walked a man in a federal marshal's coat, badge gleaming, authority that outranked even territorial judges. "Marshal Arthur Calloway," the newcomer announced. "Federal Investigation Division." Judge Bell's face went ashen. "What is the meaning of this?" "Investigation into territorial land fraud." "Your name came up quite frequently." Calloway's voice was dry as desert wind, along with several others. The marshal nodded to Eagle Flies. The Comanche warrior stepped forward with a leather satchel. Inside were documents, deeds, bills of sale, the paper trail of conspiracy. "We've been tracking this for months," Calloway said. "Land seizures, fraudulent sales, murder disguised as Indian raids." Arthur felt the ground shift beneath his feet. "How did you—" "Your friends Dutch Williams and Sadie Adler. They contacted our office weeks ago, sent evidence, testimony." Calloway's smile was thin, including a confession from Micah Bell Jr. The judge's son stepped out from behind the marshal. Alive, breathing, terrified but whole. "I'm sorry, Father," Micah Jr. said. I told them everything. Judge Bell's world crumbled. His carefully constructed empire of lies fell apart in the desert sun. You betrayed your own family. I stopped the killing, there's a difference. Colonel Favors moved closer. My men weren't involved in any massacre. No, Arthur said, but your weapons were. Stolen and used to frame innocent people. Calloway produced arrest warrants. Micah Bell Sr., Colm O'Driscoll, William Williamson, you're all under federal charges. The crowd watched in stunned silence as their judge was led away in chains. The man who dispensed justice for 3 years was revealed as a common criminal. Arthur walked to the platforms. The executioner had already begun removing the ropes. The 3 women stood free for the first time in weeks. How? Aloy asked. Arthur looked at Eagle Flies. Your brother's been working with federal agents, setting up the whole thing. But the confession, the evidence, real, all of it. Your brother just made sure it reached the right people. Lara began to cry, not from fear this time, from relief, from the knowledge that her son would grow up with a mother. Zelda touched Arthur's arm. You were willing to die for us. Why? Arthur looked at his hands, scarred from war, stained with old blood. Maybe I needed to save someone for once. The crowd began to disperse. Some looked disappointed, others seemed relieved. The blood they'd come to see would remain unspilled. Dutch Williams appeared at Arthur's side. Sadie's got the saloon open again. Coffee's on. Arthur nodded. I'll be there. He walked to where Judge Bell sat in the prison wagon. The man who'd nearly orchestrated 3 murders looked broken, defeated. It was always about the land, Bell said. Everything's about the land. Arthur studied the judge's face. Some things are worth more than land. Like what? Like being able to sleep at night. Arthur turned away. The desert stretched endlessly in all directions, still harsh, still unforgiving, but somehow more honest than the town that had grown up in its shadow. Eagle Flies waited by the horses. My people owe you a debt. No debt, we're even now. Are we? Arthur thought about it. All the violence he'd done during the war. All the innocent people who died by his hand. 3 lives saved couldn't balance those scales, but it was a start. Maybe we're closer to even, Arthur said. The Comanche warrior smiled. That's progress. Arthur walked back toward town. The sun climbed higher. Another day in the territory. Another chance to choose right over wrong. He stopped at the cemetery. All those fresh graves. All those lives cut short by hate and greed. The 3 women would not join them. Not today. Sadie's saloon was full when Arthur arrived. Dutch had coffee waiting. Hosea sat in the corner reading his Bible. John Marston had traded his sheriff's badge for a federal marshal's star. What now? Sadie asked. Arthur sat down heavily. Now we try to build something better. Think it's possible? Arthur looked out the window. The 3 Comanche women were riding north, free, alive, heading home to their families. Yeah, he said. I think it might be. The desert wind carried the scent of sage and possibility. Arthur Morgan had found his redemption in the most unlikely place. Not in a bottle, not in the past, but in the simple act of standing up when it mattered most. The sun set over Deadwood Creek. Another day ended. Another began. The cycle continued, but perhaps with a little more justice than before. And that is all to the story for now. Please let me know where you are tuning in from. Perhaps we will create a story there. Consider liking this video and subscribing to our channel. And if you enjoy our content, click this video on your screen. I promise you it's worth watching. See you tomorrow.